right. Look what I have here. All right. So, hi, I'm Eric. I'm a music producer, audio engineer, and one half of Caribe Norway, a production duo that I run with my friend Pierre. So, anyway, I've been in the market to replace my 6-year-old desktop computer that I built for music production. That's the computer I got running the audio right now. The main reason for that is near the end of my production sessions at this point. I'm starting to really see this computer struggle. I'm having to disable a lot of plugins. I'm adjusting buffer sizes all the time. And the way that Pierre and I work, we're writing, we're recording, we're producing, and to some extent mixing kind of as we go. That's really, really affecting the end of the process for us. When these MacBooks were announced, I couldn't resist picking them up and just seeing like if this could actually convince me to switch from PC to Mac, if that process would be justified based on what type of performance I'm seeing, what type of battery life I'm getting. I need to move to a more mobile setup. I'm going to be living a bit more of a nomadic lifestyle. You know, the portability of these, the battery life is really interesting. But real quick, right off the top, also, I'm not a professional YouTuber. I think it's clear I'm not trying to do all the things that YouTubers typically do. This lighting is probably not ideal. But, so I saw a gap in content regarding PC users. I specifically use Reaper, but PC music producers considering the switch to Mac, like what does that actually look like for someone that uses non-Apple software? The claims, the benchmarks for these laptops have been ridiculous. The fact that this is essentially as powerful as like some of the most powerful desktop PCs out there, it's really hard to not give this a shot. But I only ever see videos about, Logic and Final Cut Pro and kind of those main tools that are built by Apple. So of course they're going to be highly, highly optimized for the hardware, and the hardware is going to in turn be optimized for the software. So with Reaper, you're not going to get that. You're going to get what a typical developer can do. There's probably some specific hooks or hardware access that Logic has that maybe Reaper's not able to gain access to. I'm also curious, like, what does the plugin story look like? Like, installing plugins, organizing that whole process on PC has always been difficult, to say the least. So there's the whole, like, Intel plugins and M1 plugins, and how are those going to work with, like, an Intel or M1 DAW? So if I'm running the Intel version of Reaper versus the ARM version of Reaper, I'm seeing differences there. But anyway, so I had that $2,000 budget. The 14-inch MacBook falls right in line with that. It's the base model. I didn't see any benchmarks suggesting that the higher-end CPU was really going to do much for music production. So this is my review of the MacBook Pro as a PC music producer trying to make the switch. Okay, so first I'm going to copy over a work-in-progress session from my external hard drive. I want to use this session as a test to see how easily I can get up and running and compare performance between my desktop. Installing plugins went about as well as you can expect. Fairly tedious process. But one benefit I did notice is that I didn't have to worry about where plugins were being installed to. I still have to worry about that on Windows, if it's going into the common files or if it's going into the Steinberg folder or whatever other folder the developer may have chosen. So if I install a plugin and it's not showing up on my Windows computer, I have to maybe add that folder to Reaper. Whereas on the Mac, they all just go into the same folder, and I didn't have to worry about that at all. So that was an easier process for me. After some time of clicking accept and agree and typing your password every time and all this, I opened up Reaper with no issue. Started loading plugins to make sure things were working. I went through the licensing and the registration, all that tedious stuff. But it all worked. Everything loads, no errors, which is a lot better than I would expect, especially considering that this is Intel emulation. There are really no problems. So, unfortunately, if I try to actually load the session, I'm getting a crash, some sort of error, which is a little confusing to me. The plugins are all loading properly. The installations actually went quite smoothly for me. I'm not exactly sure what would be causing this. One thing, I guess the closest idea that I have is that not every VST3 plugin that I'm using on the PC side has been updated to VST3 on the Mac side. So maybe that's an issue where it's trying to, it's trying to reference a VST3, and maybe it sees that there is a VST2 version of that. I don't know. That's the only thing that I can sort of guess at this point. So I'm going to take a pause on that test, partially just because I'm a little frustrated. There's been a lot of, it's just been a lot of work just installing, going through that process. As smooth as it is, it's still not that ideal. So let's load up a session here, and let's go straight to the kind of more the fabricated stress test. All right, so I got my dog here. In most of my productions, I'm using track folders. They're nice for organization, but it's just a really easy way to bus things and not have to set up a bunch of individual buses for the drums and the bass, etc. All the tracks just within the folder are being bussed to that. And I think instead of trying to bring a full production in, this might just be the quickest way to get an idea of what sort of performance improvements I'm looking at. Stress testing the MacBook Pro versus my 6-year-old PC, creating a loop right now. Stress testing the MacBook Pro versus my 6-year-old PC, creating. Weird, I'm hearing dropouts. Check 1 2, check 1 2, check. Check 1 2, check 1 2, check. So I'm not exactly sure what was going on with that. But it still looks like I'm at 64 samples. I'm still at 48 kilohertz, 24-bit, which is, where the minimum I want to be at. But we'll see. So what I'm going to do real quick is I'm going to set this one track up. It's in a folder, and the plugins that I'm using are sort of representative of what I might actually have on a real-world track. Test track is using about 0.1%. And that's with Melodyne. So I'm going to throw this, just add Soothe on here. It's just default settings. I should turn the record enable off because now I'm getting some latency. So I have Soothe going. Then I'm just using this compressor Silica from Cush Audio. Oh, let's actually make sure we're still getting good playback with the Check 1 2, check 1 2, check. So at playback, I'm almost at 1% usage on this track. Check 1 2, check 1 2, check. Now oddly, I have less. I'm at 0.8% usage on that, so somehow adding that plugin lowered the CPU use. That doesn't make sense, but whatever. And then just throwing an EQ on. So that's a decently heavy, but still simple signal chain. So that's all then routing into this folder. So I have a Goldfoss here. I have the PSP Saturator. I have oversampling turned on that, so it's a 4x oversampler. And then I have a Fox & Go tape bus at 8 times oversample. So oversampling a lot, not really holding back. Let's do what I would normally do and throw some stuff on the master. So say we'll do a Goldfoss master, just kind of bump up some of these settings so that it's doing something. I would then probably compress. Let's throw the glue on there. And then let's just limit. Let's do a Pro L limiter. Let's see where we're at now. Check 1 2, check 1 2, check. Cool, so at about 10% usage, which is not super small. I only have one track going, and I don't have a ton of processes or a ton of effects. I have about 10 effects. One thing that's nice about Reaper is I realize I don't have a shortcut for duplicating tracks. So I'm just gonna search duplicate tracks. So Command-Shift-D should duplicate these tracks. All right. Check. So I'm at about 50%. Check 1 2, check 1 2, check. 60% or so. Check 1 2, check 1 2, check. So let's just get it to fail. Okay, that's starting to fail. Check 1 2, check 1 2, check. Say remove this, where get to a point where we can play back. And again, this is at 64 samples, a pretty low buffer size, but it's something that, you know, I want to be able to essentially stay in as long as I possibly can, so that if we want to change a vocal part, add in a quick instrumental thing, the latency is there. You know, the latency is fine. It's not going to be a problem. But yeah, my CPU is hovering 86, 85%. I feel like this should be able to play. I have 108 plugins running. Check 1 2, check 1 2, check. All check right. 1 2, check 1 2, check. So that to me kind of creates a benchmark here. I was able to get basically 15 of each type of track. So 15 buses and 15 tracks. 108 FX total. Cool. So what I'm going to do is take this session, bring it to the desktop, and see what it's looking like. All right. So I have the session copied over to my PC here. I'm just going to load it up and see what happens. So this is just straight copy from the Mac. And so it's doing the same thing where it's missing the audio file just because of the way that it's a forward or forward slash versus backslash. So it gets confused when you transfer between the two. Well, it's one thing that I really like about the PC is that I just have this little window where I can change the buffer size on my Focusrite. So I can really quickly go to the highest buffer. I can also really quickly go down to a low buffer that will work for recording. So right off the top, I'm looking at 180% CPU at 108. So, whew, the sort of demonic voice situation. When I start deleting tracks and get to the point where I can play without issue. Check 1 2, check 1 2, check. Check 1. All right. Wow, it's essentially exactly half, which is pretty surprising. Yeah. What do I think of that result? This is a 6-year-old computer. It's a desktop computer, but it is still, you know, if I look at the task manager here. So this is a 4-core CPU. It runs at 4 gigahertz. It's hyper-threaded, so that means that each core has technically 2 threads. So it can run kind of as 8 virtual cores. So this has 4 cores. The laptop is 8-core. So the thing with that is, I mean, I know that CPU cores don't really like linearly yeah. I don't know. I feel like that result is pretty positive. I guess I was expecting a bit more of a difference. All right, let's run one more stress test for a couple reasons. The main one reason is to just see if that 2x improvement we saw from the previous stress test holds true, and if that's kind of a consistent performance increase that you can expect. Additionally, this PSP Saturator plugin is compatible with Apple Silicon. It was a more recently released plugin. That will allow me to run 2 separate tests on the Mac. One that's an Intel version of Reaper, Intel version of PSP Saturator, and then the ARM version of Reaper and the ARM version of PSP Saturator. The only thing that I've changed on the PSP Saturator is I enabled Fat Mode, which is a 4x oversampler. That's just going to make the plugin work the processor heavier. Again, as always, I'm at 64 samples for the buffer size. That is the sweet spot for me for usability. And I'm just gonna duplicate that until I start getting dropouts. Check 1 2, check 1 2, check. Check 1 2, check 1 2, check. So I'm at 1 2, check 1 2, check. 30 to 40%. So I'm just gonna select all, duplicate all. Check 1 2, check. About 80. Check 1 2, check 1 2, check. 80%. Check. All right, and there we go. Check 1 2, check 1 2, check. So simple as that. I'm at about 95% CPU use. I have 55 tracks, 55 PSP saturators. Again, that's on a 4th gen Core i7 processor. So this is about a 6-year-old computer I built late 2014, early 2015. All right, so I have the session from the PC loaded up on the Mac. I have activity monitor running on the Mac here. Reaper is an Intel type of process. So that's just double checking for me because it's kind of hard to tell what version of the software that you're running. But yeah, so I still have the FAT mode on. And then I guess my question is is there a way for me to tell what type of process this is? But I guess the way that I know is that I uninstalled the Apple Silicon version of Saturator, so I should only have the Intel version. And I'm running it in an Intel host, so that should kind of mean everything is running through Rosetta on this Mac. Again, the 55 tracks that we left off with on the PC, I'm at 64 samples for the buffer. Let's just see what we're looking at.
Check 1 2, check 1 2, check.
Cool. Showing about 68% CPU use. All right, and that's the limit there. So 75, so 20 more instances. That's not huge to me.
Check 1 2, check.
You know, each track is using about a little over 1% of CPU. I'm gonna go ahead and uninstall the Intel version of Saturator here, get the ARM version of Saturator installed, and see if we can beat this. All right, so this is the last stress test, and I think arguably the more interesting one. So again, PSP Saturator, but everything is ARM now. So I'm running the Apple version. Let me bring up Activity Monitor to sort of prove to myself. Yeah, Reaper is an Apple process instead of an Intel process like it was before. Okay. So I am able to see that through the PSP Saturator itself. It says plugin version .A64. A is ARM, so ARM64 instead of, which would probably be x86 or x64 if it was Intel. I've got 75 tracks, 75 saturators, 4 times oversampling is turned on and everything, 64 sample buffer, everything is the same.
Check 1 2, check 1 2, check.
Cool. So whereas before I was at 90% CPU usage, and one additional track would start to cause dropouts, I'm looking like I'm around 60% CPU use. So that is a pretty good, improvement, at least right off the top. But let's run through the duplication and see what happens.
Check 1 2, check 1 2.
All right, there we are at 107. So from 75 to, so the PC 55, the Mac on Intel 75, the Mac on ARM 107. So the ARM is a little bit more than a 2x on my old PC, at least in this, not super realistic test, but it is at least allowing me to sort of define a baseline. I gotta say, I guess maybe I was expecting more than a 2x improvement. The chip that I do have in my desktop, I guess, is fairly beefy for the time, but these are the most beefy chip you can get today, 6 years in the future. So I was maybe expecting a bit more than a 2x improvement. The ARM improvement versus the Intel chip is pretty noticeable. So where this leaves me, at least with the stress tests, is impressed, but not 100% sold. Switching from a PC to a Mac, finding, Mac versions or finding new versions of plugins that maybe I just have on my hard drive that I've been using for years that are, maybe not made anymore. They're old. I even occasionally use a 32-bit plugin from, maybe 10 years ago. And those are things that just I know are not going to work on the Mac, and so I would have to find some replacement. which isn't a big deal. Maybe getting rid of some of those older plugins that I use is something that I could benefit from. But it does start to create, there's sort of this snowball effect of creating more cost for me. And if I just switch to a PC, I don't have to worry about rebuying certain software or, sort of starting to use new software, learning new software. I can stick with the workflow that works for me. I can use the tools that work for me. And I know that I can just buy a new Windows computer, and I don't have to change anything about how I work. And so for a Mac, coming from the PC world, I would have to see like a significant improvement, something that was kind of mind-blowing. If I could get to 200 tracks where it's like, wow, this is dramatically fast, like dramatically more powerful, I feel like all of the friction involved in changing from PC to Mac would be worth it. But this leaves me not lukewarm. I'm impressed. Like, this is a really nice computer to use. Sort of the fit and finish of it, the trackpad I've started to really get used to, and I do like a lot. The screen is very nice. Having like this is a newer screen that I bought, a 1440p. I really like this screen, but compared to this, I can see some pretty big differences between the two. So there's a lot to like about this. The fact that I've been doing all these tests on battery is pretty crazy too. And again, this is running. This is full bore, and it's warm, but there's no fan noise. I don't even. There's some air movement. It's the slightest amount of air. All right, a little bit of a wardrobe change. It's the next day. I sort of slept on those results and had just a two more questions. One that I answered, and one that kind of was too annoying to answer. But real quick, I just wanted to see what Geekbench results I would get on my desktop computer compared to the Mac, and see if that tends to line up. So on my desktop, I'm at the single core is 1125 and multi-core is 4183. If I compare that to the Mac here, I'm looking at 1768 on single core. So to me, that difference isn't dramatic. I'm not exactly sure what these numbers represent. Maybe that difference is pretty significant. And then the multi-core goes to 9820. So that's more than a 2x improvement. In a sense, like, these benchmarks may be sort of representative of what we're looking at. Additionally, I ordered a Lenovo Legion 7 because I'm not fully sold on this. I don't know if this is going to be the right option for me, and I really feel like I need to try that out. So that's going to be in a future video, but real quick, I just checked out the Geekbench on the CPU that is in that laptop. It is scoring at a 1327 single core versus the 17. So that's not that much higher than my desktop. And then the multi-core is 7043. So that's a pretty big jump from my desktop. But that is a significant amount below the Mac. Am I going to see sort of a comparative, like, this isn't a full double, so am I going to see maybe a 1.8x on the Lenovo Legion? If that's the case, I might be swayed to go with the Mac. Real quick, just to touch on it, the other test that I wanted to try was actually comparing Logic and seeing what sort of track counts I can get. So I ran the ARM version of Reaper. I used the AU, or the audio unit version of Gullfoss in this case. I was able to get to 107 tracks with that. I then tried the Intel version of Reaper, same exact session, same test, and I was able to get to 126 tracks. So I think that's telling me that the Gullfoss plugin is probably built for Intel, and running it in an Intel client is more performant. So that little piece of information is actually quite useful, because I was considering, like, right now I'm using the ARM version of Reaper to record this voiceover. And so I was considering maybe I should use the ARM version and just deal with Intel plugins until more ARM ones get developed. But it seems clear that if most of your plugins are Intel, stick with Intel, stick with an Intel DAW. So I went over to Logic to see if there would be some significant difference between Reaper. And honestly, like it just was too annoying to do the test because, one thing that I like about Reaper is Reaper allows you to, do basically anything you want to. You can create a shortcut for virtually any command imaginable. And if that command isn't built into the DAW, you can probably create a macro, which is basically just a series of shortcuts that accomplish the thing you're looking for. So in Reaper, I can just duplicate the track, all contents included. So that means the audio drops down to the next duplicated track as well. In Reaper, they only allow you to duplicate the track. You keep the settings, but you don't keep any of the audio on that track. And there's literally no way to duplicate a track and retain the contents of the track. Apple decided that that's not a very common thing that they need to do, and they don't think that you need to do it either. And for the most part, they would be right. If I'm duplicating a track in Reaper, I don't, it's usually to create a new vocal track or something, and so I'm not looking to have, all the items there, but it's nice having the option. So I think that's going to wrap this video up. I'll have 2 follow-up videos, one with the Lenovo Legion 7, kind of running through a similar type of test, although I know that I'll be able to probably very easily open up existing production sessions on that. I think I'll get a bit more true to life result, like more of a direct one-to-one comparison of I'm running this production session on my desktop, this is where my CPU is at, here it is on the Legion, here's where this CPU is at, here's the kind of headroom I'm looking at. And then on top of that, how hot is this laptop getting? How loud is it? Do I need to hide it somewhere in order to get work done? And then the other video is going to be actually just using the Mac on a real world production, giving it a try. I have a few song ideas I want to try out, create some demos. I'm not going to do a full, end-to-end production on it, but I'm going to demo out some songs, do some mixing, and just get a general idea of is the feel noticeably different than the PC? Are there things that are smoother about it? Is jumping between plugins more responsive? I'm not sure. So look out for those videos. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I hope this was helpful for you. Again, I'm Eric of Caribe Norwé. Pierre and I just put a song out called Drive With Me. It's on our YouTube. Check it out. We are producers and songwriters. We want to collaborate with other artists. We want to help lift up other artists. So if you have a song idea, contact us through Instagram, contact us through email on our website. Yeah, thanks, and I'll see you in the next video.